Have you ever had a friend who had a new experience or they discovered a new hobby and that's all they wanted to talk about, right? They're just all in, 100% in. CrossFit. Got a new workout, man, and they've got a whole new vocabulary. They're all in there. There's high rocks or it's a new diet, right? So, I'm ketogenic. I'm vegan. I'm carnivore. I love that. I go, what do you eat? Meat. That's it, right? So they're just all in, like, this will change your life, absolutely. Or it's a new hobby, whether it's, hunting or fishing or floral design or pottery. You're like, pottery post. Are you like, okay, enough pottery pictures. A little pottery's good. A lot of pottery, that's kind of annoying, right? Have you ever had that person that's just all in? They're 100% in. Well, about a week before last, Tristy and I celebrated our anniversary, 30 years. Yep, I put a little notch in my belt every time, about time for a new belt. It's just, we're racking them up, 30 years. So we went to a really cool resort over in Austin. It was a small resort, and the dining area is small, really nice, but small. And so every single meal, it's all the same people who are in this dining area, and there were these two older ladies. And so they sat near us. I mean, we could hear every conversation in the dining area. These two older ladies, every single meal, I'm not exaggerating, every single meal, they talked about pickleball. Okay, so they're every single meal, they're like, talking about their dinks, right? And how they hit their dinks and their drives and this coach they're working with and their new paddles that they bought. And, and it was crazy. I mean, every single meal. And then I got caught with this one lady. We're walking down the hall and she started talking to me about pickleball, right? We're like, okay, this is just all in. I'm like, okay, a little pickleball is good, but this is over the top. You ever had a friend who discovered Jesus? And they were all in. That is all they wanted to talk about. Reading the Word every day. They're in 4 Bible studies, going to breakaway, memorizing verses. They're like, hey, have you ever seen John 3:16? This is absolutely, have you ever seen this before? And they're so enthusiastic. They're all in. I remember I had a friend in college who he was just so incredibly, completely devoted to Jesus. Honestly, it made the rest of us feel a little bit uncomfortable. Little Jesus, it's okay, but man, that much Jesus, that's going to make the people around you feel a bit uncomfortable, right? But can you be too devoted to Jesus? That's my question. Can you be too devoted to Jesus? Here's the fact. If you quietly follow Jesus, the world will leave you alone. Sure, go to church once in a while. Read your Bible a bit. Go ahead and pray. But wait, what? You give your money to a missionary? Are you crazy? Are you crazy? You're going where this summer? To do what? You go to church every single Sunday? You get up at what time to read a Bible? Here's my argument that I want to make from John chapter 12 this morning. It says, Jesus is worthy of unrestrained worship. All in, holding absolutely nothing back whatsoever, complete and utter devotion, which probably will make the people around you feel uncomfortable, but this is the way to live your life. So we're going to look at the example of a woman in John chapter 12, and she was all in. And she was so completely and utterly devoted to her love for Jesus that the people around her felt uncomfortable. But her example, like my friend in college, her example it's challenging and it's inspiring, and this is the way to live. So I want you to read with me John chapter 12. We're going to begin in verse 1. It says, Jesus, therefore, 6 days before the Passover, came to Bethany where Lazarus was, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. So they made him a supper there, and Martha was serving, but Lazarus was one of those reclining at the table with him. Mary then took a pound of very costly perfume of pure nard and anointed the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. So here's the setting. It's less than a week before Jesus' crucifixion. He's back in Bethany. This is the city where he's raised Lazarus from the dead, a short time before that. And so the city is abuzz. People are wanting to see Jesus. They're wanting to see Lazarus. And there's a man named Simon. His nickname is Simon the leper, which clearly he no longer has leprosy, or people don't show up at his house. So he's almost certainly a man that Jesus has healed, but the name stuck. So they just call him Simon the leper. Everybody's gathered for a meal in honor of Jesus. And in the middle of this meal, it's interrupted by this extravagant display of worship. And I literally dug through a thesaurus this week. I'm like, what's the word I'm looking for? What's the word I'm looking for? The only word I could come up with was unrestrained. Because what happens in this moment is Mary literally holds nothing back in her expression of her love for Jesus. And the question I want you to wrestle with this morning is, are you restrained in your love for Jesus? Are you holding anything back? What are you holding back? And if you're holding something back, why? Why are you holding anything back in your love for Jesus? There are 4 lessons about unrestrained worship that I want us to derive from this story this morning. And the first is this: unrestrained worship is a way of life. I love what Sarah said. She had to learn that everything that she did in life was worship. And for Mary, unrestrained worship was the pattern of her life. We actually see Mary 3 times in the Gospels. There are 3 moments. There is the meal in her home, and Dylan spoke from this text last week. And then there's the raising Lazarus from the dead, and now this meal in the home of Simon the leper. And where is Mary on every single occasion? She's at Jesus' feet. Now, Mary, Lazarus, Martha were some of Jesus' best friends, so they spent lots of time with Jesus. There are lots of scenes that could have been recorded by the gospel writers, but they only record 3, and in absolutely every single one, Mary is at Jesus' feet. Why? Because she loves Jesus. And my question for you this morning is, do you love Jesus? And I'm sure you would answer, you'd say yes. I would say yes. I love Jesus. But also, I do love other things. And because of my pride and my fear and my anger and my lusts, my affections get out of order. And yeah, I love Jesus, but these other things that I love begin to get me distracted in my love for Jesus, and so my affections are disordered. And the question is, how do we put our affections in order? Of course, there are other things we're going to love, but do we love Jesus first, most, best, highest? How do we put the loves that we have in their proper place, in their proper order? And I would argue the pathway to that is deliberate devotion. Deliberate devotion. Mary sits at Jesus' feet. When there's an opportunity to sit at Jesus' feet, Mary sits at Jesus' feet and she listens to Jesus. There's nothing that is more important to Jesus. Now, let me take you back for a moment to the text that Dylan preached last week, the meal that's in the home of Mary and Martha and Lazarus. Remember that Martha is busy. She's preparing the meal. Mary is sitting at Jesus' feet, and Luke makes this comment. He says, but Martha was distracted with much service. The word for service there is diakonos. We get the word deacon from that. And the point is that service isn't a bad thing. Service is a really good thing. In fact, Jesus is going to have to eat at some point in time, and he almost certainly did eat a meal at their home. If you look at early in the book of Acts, the apostles are preaching, teaching, but they're also having to serve tables, and there are widows who don't have food distribution, they don't have financial distribution, and so they say, we need to set apart a group of men who will be deacons, who will be servants, who will serve. Their worship will be service. Service is good, but service isn't first. What's first is sitting and listening to Jesus and loving Jesus. And it's not an either-or proposition, but it's a matter of priorities. And what Mary does time and time and time again is she prioritizes her love and her devotion for Jesus above all else. Now, anybody heard of 5 Languages of Love, that book? Okay, yeah, great book, wonderful book. Students, if you ever want to get married, you should read that book. That's a really good book. But also, even if you don't want to get married, or if you're already married, if you're not sure if you'll get married, you should read that book because it's going to help you understand your brothers and your sisters and your parents and your roommates and your coworkers. It's not the gospel, but he maps out here 5 different ways that people give love and receive love. It's a really excellent book. My wife's love languages, we read that book early on, and I learned this just watching her. Words of affirmation and quality time. My wife loves words of affirmation, quality time. However, there was a stage in life when that shifted a bit, and that's when we had little kids at home, and now the love language became acts of service, right? Acts of service. I remember one day I came home, and I had a great day at work. I'm like, hey, baby, how was your day? She goes, it's okay. It's okay. I go, well, what'd you do? She said, I wiped. She said, I wiped. I wiped floors. I wiped counters. I wiped noses. I wiped behinds. I wiped. And I thought, there's a new love language in town here. Honey, how can I serve you? What can I wipe on your behalf, right? It had shifted. Now, let's put this in spiritual life terms. What is God's primary love language? I would argue, let's add a 6th, it's unrestrained worship, which only applies to him. I think God's primary love language is unrestrained worship. I would argue God's primary love language is not acts of service. It is unrestrained worship. Now, before you think, well, I'm going to set this guy straight, and you're going to come up after the service, and you say, Brian, have you ever read Ephesians 2:10? I have read Ephesians 2:10. It's been a while, Yes, I know Ephesians 2:10. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, acts of service, which God prepared beforehand, that we should walk in them, we should do acts of service. And our acts of service can be worship. Our financial giving can be worship. Our words can be worship. Like all of these things can be worship. But first is unrestrained worship and love and devotion from a place then of a heart devoted to Jesus. We give financially. We serve the people around us. But first is worship. And Mary figures that out. Unrestrained worship. Now, in eternity, we will work, we will serve. New heavens and new earth. We will have occupations, things that we do because we're designed to work. 6 days of work, 1 day of rest, right? We were designed for that. But our primary preoccupation will be worship. And so now we practice, right? We practice. Unrestrained worship for Mary was a way of life. Second, unrestrained worship requires sacrifice. Read with me chapter 12 and verse 3 again. It says, Mary then took a pound of very costly perfume of pure nard and anointed the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. Mary made a very real, very tangible financial sacrifice. This is a pound of very costly perfume of pure nard. Pure nard was an oil perfume, an aromatic oil that was derived from a plant in India. It was rare, it was costly, it was valuable. A normal flask of this perfume would contain an ounce or 2. So it was an investment. It was easy to store, it was easy to transport, it didn't go bad. An honored guest would get a drop or 2 on his or her head. But we're told Mary pours out the entire bottle. It's a pound or a Roman pound, 12 ounces. We're told later that the value of that is 300 denarii. That is what a working person could earn an entire year. So imagine they have no expenses, right? They don't have to repair their camel or their donkey, right? They don't have to pay for housing. They don't have any insurance, healthcare costs, or clothing. Nothing wears out, no new sandals, right? They don't have to pay any expenses. They're able to save absolutely everything they make in an entire year. That's an entire year's savings. So imagine, students, you graduate and you get to move home and your parents say, which I know you don't want, it's just an illustration, right? You don't want to move home, I got that. But imagine you do, you move home and your parents say, you know what, you can live at home and there will be no expenses. Literally, we'll pay for your car, we'll pay for your auto insurance, we'll pay for your health insurance, we're gonna pay for the new tires on your car, we're gonna pay for all of your food, we're gonna pay for your clothing, we're gonna pay for absolutely everything. So you can save every single dollar you make. So you're gonna save $70,000, right? You're like, so switch from poli-sci to engineering, and you're good to go, right? So you 70,000 or 40,000 or whatever, but you save absolutely every dollar, and at the end of that year, you just give all of it to Jesus. Could you? Would you? Wow. Would you hold anything back? Now, I read again recently that to raise a child from 0 to 18 costs $310,000 for the average middle-class family. Sorry. We got 2 little ones right now, and some of you got 5 kids. Like $310,000 per kid, and that doesn't include college education. So the moral of the story is get a scholarship, right? I mean, that's a lot of money. Now, I promise you, for those of us who are parents here in town, none of us ever added it up. Never even crossed our mind. Maybe now it's crossed your mind. But before, it never crossed your mind to add it up. Why? What are you going to do? Not provide? You love your children, so you just give and you give and you give and you give because you love. And we're told Mary holds nothing back. It's a real cost. In fact, in one of the other gospel accounts, told she breaks the vial. Right, so these vials were kind of a cylinder shape, but then a narrow neck came out at the top, cork in the lid here. That narrow neck just shatters it. Right, her intent is not to measure her love. And it would have been appropriate for her to give Jesus a drop or two, or take the lid off and give him a quarter, or to give him a half, or give him she just breaks, there's no going back. She pours out absolutely everything, nothing held back. You know, when I was reading this text, it reminded me of Abraham sacrificing Isaac. So he takes his son with him, his only son, the son, it says, that he loves, the son on whom all of the promises that God has given him, they all rest on Isaac. And he goes and he ties him up, he binds him, and he's ready to give what he loves most because he loves God more and he believes in God and he trusts God. And he didn't ultimately have to, but he was willing to. He held nothing back. Now compare that to the sacrifice of Ananias and Sapphira in Acts chapter 5. They gave some, but they said they gave all because their audience wasn't really God. It was the people around them. They wanted to be perceived as generous, sacrificial, devoted worshipers, but they weren't. They held something back. Are you holding anything back? I've noticed that whenever I think about giving my time or my money or my skill or whatever, when I think about it, I contemplate that and I start to calculate. There's just something in my heart. I just start to calculate and I wonder, should I give all here? I had a really weird heart moment about 2 months ago. Family came to our house and they had little kids, and our son just happened to be coming through, and so he went up in the attic and he got all of his Legos out, and he and his little kid, they're just playing Legos and they're building Legos, and the little boy had built this car with some real cool wheels on it, whatever. At the end of that time, he built this thing. My son said, "Hey, why don't you just take that home?" And I had this really crazy heart moment. I was like, don't give away your Legos. They're not even my Legos. And we have a million Legos, like countless Legos. There's something weird in my heart. I'm like, don't give away your Legos. I just calculate there's something in me holding back. And I want to ask you, are you holding anything back? Are you restrained in your worship? Why are you restrained in your worship? Are you willing to give all? Mary worshiped at significant, real cost. Third, unrestrained worship requires courage. It says, but Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples who was intending to betray him, said, why was this perfume not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor? Now he said this not because he was concerned about the poor, but because he was a thief, and as he had the money box, he used to pilfer what was put into it. Part of our anniversary week celebration, we went to dinner at the Republic. Hadn't been there in a long time. Since they've moved into their new location, thought, we're going to go do a fancy, it's 30th anniversary, don't be cheap, Brian, let's go to a really nice restaurant. And we sat down at the Republic, and we hadn't even ordered yet. And somebody dropped dishes in the kitchen. You've been in a restaurant where that's happened, right? What happens when the dishes drop? All conversation stopped. And it happens at nice restaurants, it happens at cheap restaurants. There's just this shattering. All conversation stopped. Every head turns. Mary breaks the vial. What happens? All conversation stops. Every head turns. And there's not just a sound of shattering glass. There's this smell, and we're told it permeates. This is a pound of perfume. And it's a thick, oily perfume. It's incredibly aromatic. There's a shattering of glass. Every eye turns. The perfume is poured. It's just an overwhelming visual and smell sensation that just grabs people. Another part of our anniversary, right? This is like my last experience, so I'm talking a lot about it, right? But you know, even on our anniversary, I'm cataloging illustrations. Might have been a little distracted, but we went to Austin, then we drove up to Dallas, taking a Dallas Stars game because my wife's a gamer. She's such a good sport, and we sat next to the worst fans ever. But it was a really cool game. Dallas won 7-2, so it was really fun. But you know, there's a guy in front of us. We're in the nosebleeds, right? And he's yelling at the opposing team's goalie, and I go, "Hey, he can't hear you." I didn't actually. I mean, if Tristy hadn't been with me, I would have, but I didn't. I didn't say that. But then the guy next to me had bathed in cologne. Right? And I was like, this literally at one point, I mean, I was trying to not be rude or whatever, but I literally sat like this with my quarter zip pulled up over my face for a while. I'm like, this is terrible. Now, he hadn't bathed in cologne. He probably just put on a little bit too much. But that's the point of cologne and perfume, right? It's concentrated. Well, this is a pound. It's just whoosh. And what happens? They begin to ridicule her. What in the world are you doing? Mary breaks all social conventions. We're told that she lets down her hair. Loose hair, loose woman. That's the connotation. She lets down her hair. She actually kneels at Jesus' feet. She pours out the oil, and then a single woman touches a single man, and she wipes his feet with her hair. I mean, everyone feels uncomfortable except Jesus and Mary. But we're told Judas scolds her, but it's not just Judas. I would encourage you to go back and read all three accounts. It says the disciples were indignant when they saw this, and they said, "Why this waste?" It wasn't just Judas, it was all the disciples. And in the account in Mark, it's not just the disciples, but it's everyone there. And it says actually, literally, they scolded her. They're not just whispering among themselves, they're saying, "You foolish woman." But what the world calls waste, Jesus calls worship. And she doesn't care. She doesn't care what they think. Remember when David brought the Ark of the Covenant back to Jerusalem? What did he do? Man, he just danced and he sang and he's just going crazy. He's so incredibly overwhelmed with joy, and his only audience is the Lord, and he's dancing and he's singing, and it's his wife who says, "You made yourself out to be a fool." He says, "I'd rather be a fool in your eyes, but be honored in the Lord's eyes." I don't care what anyone else thinks. I just want to give God everything. I want to give God my all. Are you holding anything back from the Lord in your worship? Or are you unrestrained? Fourth lesson is this: Jesus rewards unrestrained worship. Verse 7. Jesus therefore said, "Let her alone, so that she may keep it for the day of my burial. For you always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me." Jesus defends her. He says, "Leave her alone, you jerks." Right? That's not in the text. That's just what I imagine. That's how I hear it. You guys are jerks. He defends her. Just leave her alone. Leave her alone. You're calling it waste, I call it worship. But it doesn't produce anything, right? It's not productive. It's just poured out. And Jesus said, but it's not waste, it's worship, because she did it for me. In fact, in the account in Matthew, it says, Jesus, aware of this, said to them, "Why do you bother the woman? For she has done a good deed for me." She's done good. Like Mary's on a roll right now, right? It just happened a few days earlier that they had that meal, and Mary's sitting at Jesus' feet, and Martha's, distracted. Tell her to get up and help. She goes, no, Mary chose the good part, right? Mary's on a roll. Jesus is praising her. She's choosing well. Every chance she gets, she's at Jesus' feet every single time. And so he praises her. And then he makes a promise about her and to her. "Truly I say to you, wherever this gospel is preached in the whole world, what this woman has done will also be spoken of in memory of her." And here we are. And for 2,000 years, people have read this passage and been inspired and been challenged and maybe felt a little bit uncomfortable and said, "I'm not there yet, but I want to be there. I want to give my all like Mary." And Jesus said, "You know what? People are going to talk about this forever." Wow. Forever. Can you imagine people talking about you forever because you held nothing back? But I think the most beautiful part of the reward that he grants to her is the insight that she has that no one else has. Matthew chapter 26, verse 12, it says, "For when she poured this perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for burial." Wow. I'm sure Mary didn't understand everything yet, but she had more insight than anyone else. Just Mary understood more than anyone else. Jesus is going to the cross. Now, what's striking to me, if you think about the sequence of this, is Jesus had literally just told his disciples. So when Jesus had finished all these words, he said to his disciples, "You know that after 2 days the Passover is coming and the Son of Man is to be handed over for crucifixion." And which of them understood what he was saying? Absolutely none of them. In fact, most of the time when he told them this, they would go, "Hey, who do you think is the greatest?" Right? I mean, come on, guys. But Mary heard, Mary listened, Mary understood. Why? Because Mary was undistracted. She was focused on Jesus. She was focused on no one and nothing else but Jesus. And so Mary is the one who says, there is a moment here. There is an opportunity here. I should go get some oil. I should take my life savings and give it to Jesus in this moment. And everyone else mocks her. They ridicule her, and Jesus defends her because she's the only one who understands what's going to happen in this moment. She has insight because of her intimacy with Jesus, like no one else. Now, how do we take this and put it into our own world? I want you to imagine for a moment a scene like this. A family member is about to die, and loved ones are all gathered around. They're sitting near the bed. No one says to themselves, no one thinks to themselves, I'll tell him later that I love him. I'll tell her later how much she means to me. Let me hold back my affection for the moment and no. Because the moment is now. Right? The moment is right now. This is the moment. This is the moment to say those words, to express that affection. Great, order flowers for the funeral, but why not flowers now? Why not words now? Why not give now? Church, right, and I'm telling you now, this is the moment, right now. I'll also confess to you, I told our worship team in production before we started, this morning, even as I was reading back through this passage, I was thinking about it, I just had this incredible sense, I cannot do justice to this. I just can't. And I thought again this morning, do I live this? What am I holding back? What are the things in my heart? And I let the Spirit just dig again. There's things I'm holding back. I'm still restrained. But what I want for us is this. I want us to be unrestrained in our worship. I want you to be free in your worship. I want you to hold nothing back, because this is the way to live life. This is the example that we see from Mary, holding nothing back. And so I want you to think about these three questions this week. Okay, start this morning, but right now, is your love for Jesus first in your life? Of course there are other things you enjoy. Of course there are other hobbies and exercise plans and diet plans. There's a spouse and kids. They're in your job and career, and you like a beautiful house, and you're concerned about your kids' education and their sports career, because that's going to provide retirement for you, because they're really just that good. They're not, okay? But of course you love other things, but do you love Jesus first? Parents, if somebody asked your kids what's most important to your parents, what would they say? Would they say, oh, clearly, nothing is more important to our family than our love for Jesus? What are you holding back? Why are you holding back? What sacrifice, not just can you make, but what sacrifice will you make this week to worship Jesus? Let's pray. Oh, Father, I pray that we would have the wisdom and the insight and the discernment to hold nothing back, that we would see this is the moment to consecrate ourselves, to give all to you. Father, forgive us for the things that we hold back foolishly. Remind us that there will be a moment, there will be a day when we're standing before you. We'll have no regrets. That we were completely and utterly devoted to your Son, Jesus Christ, that we were unrestrained in our worship. Lord, give us that freedom. Remove the fear that we need to calculate and contemplate. Should I give a little? Should I give a lot? Should I give all? And let us find our joy in life, in our worship of your Son, Jesus Christ. It's in his name we pray. Amen.